Well, good morning, everyone. It is Friday, June 26th, and I want to begin by talking about the drought monitor here in the lower 48. Drought continuing for much of the country. Not a whole lot of relief if you're looking at the Intermountain West. In fact, if we look at the Great Plains extending back towards the Pacific coast here, you can kind of see how the area over California is expanding here in terms of overall abnormally dry conditions here. Also, these areas of, let's say, severe and exceptional drought that we see here in the dark maroon have pretty much stayed intact since the last, let's say, 3 or 4 months. Not a whole lot has changed here over areas west of the Mississippi. However, where we've seen significant change, and hopefully I can show you this here in just a moment, is over Texas and places over the southeast, let's say east of there into Louisiana, Mississippi, Alabama, and Georgia. We should see this area in particular here quite a bit of relief here the last several weeks. In fact, if you've been following my channel of late, you've probably noticed that we've had heavy rain in the deep south week after week after week. That's not for the entire South, as we'll come to see here in just a moment, but there has been quite a bit of relief here, again, from Texas eastward into, let's say, Alabama and parts of Georgia even, here over the deep South. So let's kind of get to that here so you guys can see that. And in fact, you can see that abnormally dry conditions continue for parts of Georgia. But if you were to go back even 2 months ago here over southern Georgia, there was an exceptional drought here. So let me kind of highlight that for you guys here over South Georgia. Northern Florida still is in severe drought currently, but they have seen some relief as well here in recent weeks. Again, we're getting on average maybe 1 to as much as 3 inches of rainfall each week here over the deep south, and that's really helped conditions here. So we do have some long-term effects continuing in these areas that appear tan or even red here on the map. Wherever you see white here on the map, we've seen full recovery in many locations. So that's very good news. However, conditions continue to be rough here over North Carolina and Virginia. Again, you can see a lot of red here over central Virginia into central North Carolina. We have seen some rain here that's kind of been maintaining the drought level or the drought conditions here over the mid-Atlantic. However, again, if you live in central North Carolina, you have an exceptional drought here still. So conditions are quite bad, and we don't see much in the way of relief here even going into next week. So one area that we'll see a lot of rainfall coming up, and I'll highlight that for you guys here on the map, is the Ohio Valley and the mid-Mississippi Valley here. So might be a poor choice in color here, but you can make it out from the green circle. This is the area that's going to be receiving abundant rainfall for the next several days. The last area I want to highlight here is over Minnesota. This area here in particular, we're seeing more of this tan and also golden color here. So the dry conditions are really picking up here in Minnesota, and that area is increasing quite substantially here over, and that's also expanding into Wisconsin and places to the east potentially. So I do want to mention them, watching that area over the next couple of weeks to see if conditions either worsen or alleviate. And we will have some showers and thunderstorms moving into the Dakotas as well as Minnesota as we get into early next week. So could see some rainfall at least. It doesn't look like very heavy amounts at this time, but be something that we do watch moving forward. Now, one thing I hope we see less of moving forward is tornadoes. And typically for this time of year, as we move from June into July, we do see a decrease in that number of tornadoes. And I've got a couple of maps here to share with you guys. The top map is showing each state's typical amount of tornadoes that they see for a typical June. And we can see that here across Texas, about 14 on average in the state of Texas. And as we move up through the Great Plains, really through Tornado Alley itself, we can see that we have an average of about 12 to 14 tornadoes here. The thing that's interesting to me is Oklahoma, in that I'm actually surprised that this number is showing 5. So I would expect that to actually be higher than what we're seeing here. But a lot of this region here over the Great Plains in the Midwest has a high number of tornadoes on average here for the month of June. By comparison, if we look at the map just below here, for the month of July, we can see a significant decrease in that number of tornadoes across all states here. And we can see that over the states of North Dakota and Minnesota, that we still continue to have a high risk of tornadoes. And the thing I want to ask you guys is, why does the tornado threat change over time as we move from spring into summer? And I think another helpful question here is to think about what dynamics actually go into creating a tornado in the first place, and just consider how that's changing over time as we move into the warmer months here, seeing that decrease in tornadoes overall moving from June into July. And one thing to consider here is the trough-ridge pattern and how that's changing as we move into the warmer summer months. So see how you guys do with those questions, and then I'll take a look here in the next couple of days and see if we have an answer here. If not, I'll try to provide that in the comments down below. This kind of leads into our forecast the next couple of days. Will we actually see more severe weather over the weekend and into early next week? And the short answer here is yes, we will continue to see some severe weather. Now, one thing I have mentioned in previous videos is to look for a shortwave trough, as that's usually an indicator, at least downstream of that, where we see severe weather activity. What's hard to see here is the shortwave here over Missouri. And there's this little buckle, right, that goes into the northern part of Missouri. And whenever you see that, these cooler colors kind of pushing to the south, that is considered a shortwave trough here on the 500 millibar height map. And anywhere downstream of that, or just to the right, I'll kind of highlight this region here, there is the potential at least for some severe weather activity. Again, just kind of taking the trough itself into account. There are other factors, of course, like wind shear that is not shown on this map, and also dew points, the surface moisture, right, that plays into this as well. But in general, you can have an idea of where the severe weather activity can take place. Now, we will have some additional lift going into this region because of the low pressure system over the same state here of Missouri, and that's going to provide counterclockwise flow and moisture being pulled up from the deep south, right, from the Gulf of Mexico into the Midwest. And that's only going to work to intensify these thunderstorms and provide a better risk of severe weather as we move into Friday afternoon. Now, as we look off to the west, you'll notice that we have a much larger trough moving on shore here into the west coast. And this is going to play a factor into severe weather, let's say over the northern Great Plains and eventually the state of Minnesota as we get into early next week. So that'd be something to watch here, the progress of that larger trough here over the west coast. Now, just to highlight for you guys where that low pressure system was, it was here over northern Missouri during the early portion of Friday afternoon. And again, we have that counterclockwise flow bringing up moisture from the deep south. So we probably have dew points in the upper 60s, lower 70s here. And we'll have some wind shear, right? We'll have some changing winds with height, not only due to that shortwave trough that we mentioned, but the low pressure system itself that's positioned over northern Missouri. Now, in general, we have a marginal risk of severe weather over the plains extending into, let's say, the Ohio Valley here. But the best chance is going to be over the middle Mississippi Valley, intersecting with the Ohio River, pretty much around the southern tip of Illinois. Now, the main risk with this will be high winds and hail along the Ohio River Valley Friday afternoon. There is the small risk of a tornado, though, especially, let's say, around the border here of Kentucky and Illinois, as well as Indiana. Now, one thing we'll notice as we move into Saturday is that low pressure system now positioned over Ohio. And once again, we're going to have that counterclockwise flow, bringing more moisture into the mid-Atlantic region. One thing that's not easy to pick up here is we will have some wind shear moving into the mid-Atlantic as well, and that will provide some additional lift over this region, especially as you get into, let's say, eastern portions of Virginia, eastern portions of North Carolina as well. So just to kind of highlight that region for you guys, it'll probably be somewhere in here. Let's say anywhere from around Richmond to Norfolk in the state of Virginia, perhaps from Raleigh to the Outer Banks here in North Carolina. Guys, also take a note of the low pressure here over the northern Great Plains. One thing that's a little bit different here, you'll notice that the flow around this low pressure system is more out of the south here and kind of curls back to the north and west. And what that's going to do is throw back some moisture and also some instability on the northern side of this low pressure system. So imagine all that being thrown back into the cold air, and that interaction is going to likely produce some severe weather into Montana and North Dakota, maybe even southern portions of Canada here as we move into Saturday afternoon. In fact, that's what we see here from the Storm Prediction Center. We can see the yellow regions here highlighted over the mid-Atlantic, also over the Dakotas and parts of Montana. The main threat again is high winds and hail. I would expect that there's a larger tornado risk here over the northern Great Plains, just because of that interaction with the warm and cold air here. But one thing that was highlighted by the SPC is the possibility of greater wind shear over the mid-Atlantic. So that's just something to watch here over central Virginia and North Carolina, especially if you're driving, let's say, near Richmond and Raleigh. Now, if we're looking at these two areas of precipitation, starting Friday, moving into Saturday, you'll notice that area of low pressure over Missouri moving into the mid-Atlantic, providing additional chances of showers and thunderstorms over the Ohio Valley. And you can see that even over the mid-Atlantic here. I wouldn't be surprised again if we have a dry slot here somewhere over central Virginia and North Carolina where we don't see much rain once again. Any of these systems that move over the mountains have a tendency to kind of dry up. But that being said, I do think we'll see at least some light rain over much of the state of North Carolina and Virginia, so that will be beneficial in these areas that are experiencing severe drought. Also during the day Friday, I do want to take note here over New England, there is the chance of some rain, though lighter, here over northern New York into Vermont, New Hampshire, and Maine. We also have the shower and thunderstorm activity that's accompanying this low pressure system moving into the Great Plains as we move into Saturday afternoon. You'll notice that we have quite a bit of thunderstorm activity over northern North Dakota, perhaps over Montana here into southern portions of Alberta. And still, we have a general area of light rain over, let's say, the west coast near Washington State and Oregon State. We can kind of see how the rain continues here from Seattle down to Portland over that 2-day period between Friday and Saturday. So what happens as we get into Sunday is that trough dives deeper right into the southwest. And we have a pretty strong low pressure system developing over Colorado. And as you can imagine, right, that could spawn showers and thunderstorms downstream of it over the Great Plains as we move into Sunday. And eventually, let's say into the Midwest as we move later in the day Monday. Now, just as important, guys, is we'll probably have high temperatures here over the lower Mississippi Valley, the mid-Mississippi Valley here. But in general, you can see where we have this flow out of Texas, out of Mexico. It's kind of moving from southwest to northeast. And I'll be bringing in a lot of these warmer temperatures, right? We're talking about 90s here, and that of course will bring in the warmer temperatures as we move into Sunday here across the south. So what about the severe weather potential for Sunday? Now we can see here over the northern Great Plains we have a 15% chance currently. This is the forecast from the SPC once again. And again, we have that low pressure system moving out of the Intermountain West, helping to lift that warm, moist air right from the Gulf of Mexico, colliding with the cooler temperatures over southern Canada. And of course, that gives us the ability to have some severe weather potential in North Dakota. And this will only continue, let's say, eastward into Minnesota as we move into the day Monday. And as we get into Monday, we can see where that low pressure system is now over the Dakotas. And we'll likely have that severe weather over Minnesota. Showers and thunderstorms will likely fire up here during the day, Monday. And we'll likely have another area of showers and thunderstorms over Alberta, extending southward into Montana due to this low pressure system over southern Canada during the day Monday. So that's something we'll take a look at here briefly. The last thing I want to share with you guys is that we'll likely have this heat wave continuing right over the Mississippi Valley. So if you live in St. Louis, Missouri, down to New Orleans, places like Chicago, Illinois, also Louisville, Kentucky, places like that, Memphis, Tennessee. All these areas here over the Mississippi Valley will likely have high heat indices during the day Monday. So just be careful if you're working out there Monday afternoon. And as far as the severe weather potential, again, downstream of that low pressure system, this again was over South Dakota at this time. And you can see how this leads to that severe weather potential here over Minnesota and western Wisconsin. Now, beyond this point, going into Tuesday, Wednesday, you can imagine that trough, right, that was over the Intermountain West continuing to the east here. So I wouldn't be surprised if we see additional chances of severe weather, especially if you live in, let's say, portions of the Great Lakes into Wisconsin, Michigan, places like that as we move towards the middle of next week. Now, fortunately, since we have this heat wave on the way for the middle Mississippi Valley and the Ohio Valley, we do have some heavy rain over the next couple of days that will kind of keep things from drying out too bad in this region. And we have a general inch to as much as 3 inches of rainfall. If you live in, let's say, Kansas to Missouri, Illinois, Indiana, all the way into West Virginia here in northern portions of Virginia. So I have a large area here that could pick up quite a bit of rain. Now, I do want to mention that we will have some relief here in eastern Virginia, eastern North Carolina, places that are in severe and exceptional drought. However, you can make out here there's a region of light green on the eastern side of the Appalachians here, and that could extend into central Virginia. Also central North Carolina here. It's hard to tell where that dry area will actually set up. But somebody's going to be missing the rain as well. Not everybody will be getting the shower and thunderstorm activity. But again, this is due to the southern Appalachians creating this rain shadow just downstream of them. A couple of other things I want to point out here on the map. We can see here over the deep south, a large region now not getting the heavy rain that we were seeing in previous weeks. So we're going to actually see conditions drying out. And so even though we've seen some drought relief here in recent weeks, just keep in mind things can dry out pretty quickly once again, especially with a heat wave in place. So we have that. Another area to kind of watch the drought continuing to grow would be here over, let's say, southern portions of Minnesota into Wisconsin, perhaps into Michigan. California, once again, looks like it's going to be rather dry, but again, that's typical for this time of year. We can see here over the northeast, though, there are some chances of rain. Again, a bit cooler in that region, so not as much drying out by comparison. Now, if you're in one of these areas that's impacted by severe or exceptional drought, it would be interesting to hear from you and what the impacts are in your area. Well, guys, we'll leave it at that today. I hope you enjoyed today's video. If you have an answer to today's question, just leave that down in the comments below. Otherwise, I hope you have a great weekend. I hope to see you for the next video. Bye for now.